What's up, guys? Bucky here. Just wanted to check in, see how everyone's doing. Get on the Facebook Live for today. What is today? Wednesday? Happy Wednesday, everybody. Just wanted to say hi. One of the things that came up for me is I've been posting a couple different things about the management of your state, and it's such a cool thing, right? This idea of I get to choose anything that I want to at any given moment, and depending on what's going on in my life, whether it's a challenging situation or anything really, I get to choose how I interpret that situation and how I take that on, and what it provides me, what it takes away from me, or what it teaches me. So I just wanted to reference that a little bit because I know I've been doing a lot of posts. It's been pretty cool. If you go onto my feed, there's been a bunch of different comments on some of the things that I've been doing, whether that's gratitude or just proposing different questions, and it's cool to build a little sense of community where people are answering those things, and there's so much to learn from different people. So if you're one of those people that have posted or if yet to post, I just invite you to get on there and just to share. It's pretty cool. I love the interaction, and I was just inspired today by a couple different things. I just recently moved up to Glendale, California, and I'm kind of walking through the streets, and I was going to get my haircut today. Obviously I haven't done it yet, but there's just so much inspiration and there's so much power in community. And it's amazing what happens when we step out of the insecurity of who we are and we just start to be, and we start to step into the power of who we are and start to trust our intuition and to trust what there is to do. And it's interesting because even for me, walking down the streets, there was had a moment where I was like, I want to start doing this kind of social project where I start interviewing people, just random people on the street, and asking them about, what their current life position is, like what they do for work and what's their career and things like this, and then asking them what their passion is, and talking about some of the distinctions that show up in that. And I feel this like internal want to do that, and still there's a internal dialogue that says, well, don't do that, and there's all this insecurity and things like this. So it's an amazing process to have the awareness of that, and to notice when you choose it and don't choose it, and also how to find a choice that makes sense for you, and how to find that balance between not choosing it, going over the top, or finding someplace in between. I think it's such an awesome distinction. But really today I want to talk about this idea and this question of is your life in slow, or is it in flow? Again, one more time, is your life in slow or is your life in flow? And I know a lot of us talk about this idea of flow state, right? How do we get into a state where my life is moving forward, where there's a momentum, where things feel like they're happening and there's an ease? And how do I get out of this place of being stuck, or having things be difficult, or having things be hard? And I think the metaphor to think about, and this is one thing that a good friend of mine, Scotty Z, you should share with me. If you guys don't know Scotty Z, check him out on Facebook. He's awesome. He's always doing amazing posts. Shout out to Scotty Z. But we met working Green Super Camp in Bali, and at the time he was, he'd spent a lot of time in Australia as a river raft guide. And one of the things that he would always share is, the metaphor of the river, right? And that life is like a river, and everybody in their life has their own specific river and their own specific flow that's associated to that river. And if you've ever been river rafting before, there's some pretty amazing distinctions within that, like finding those spots in the river where the current is moving the fastest, and noticing the spots where there's so many things underneath the surface that could be hindering the momentum of how we move through the different areas of our lives, and the external surroundings, being aware of what's happening inside of the boat, what's happening around the boat and the environment around you, but also having the knowledge and distinctions to be able to interpret what's taking place on the surface and underneath the surface. And I think for everybody, we all have kind of a sweet spot in our life, and we've all experienced times in our lives where we've been in this thing called flow. It has to do with our state, it has to do with our momentum, it has to do with the things that are showing up around us, and also the things that are showing up inside of us. But we've also experienced the other, right? We've also experienced, like in that river rafting metaphor, when we've gotten into those rapids and we've gotten into those eddies, and we've been stuck behind rocks, and we've been stuck behind boulders, or we've been swimming upstream, or we've been parked on the side, and it's been difficult to move, right? And what I want to share today is just some of the different distinctions on how to stay in flow, and how to be aware of whether you're in flow or not flow, and kind of the different approaches to that. And one of the things that we talk about a lot, or that I talk about a lot in this conversation, Facebook Live, is this idea of really understanding our emotions and having a really strong sense of awareness, internal awareness to how I feel in any given moment. And in the same time, as I start to develop an awareness in who I am, and not only take my emotions as literal, but also take my emotion as triggers and as signs for the things that are not necessarily literal. So because I feel fear doesn't mean that it's a dangerous situation. Because I fear doubt doesn't mean that I should avoid it. Sometimes when I feel doubt, I should approach it. And sometimes when I feel fear, it's an opportunity for me to step forward into flow as compared to out of flow. And those are the experiment of life as far as the inner game and understanding our emotions is something that we constantly are invited to play in. And I think one of the most exciting things in life and in flow in general is finding that edge, right? Finding that line of where you can really be in the grittiness and the activeness of life. I think so many of us are inactive. There's so many people, flogistics, nice. I think so many of us are sidelined. We are inactive in our lives. We're inactive in our passions. We're doing the things that we think that we're supposed to do because someone has told us we're supposed to do them, whether that's our friends and family, or whether that's society, or whether that's our mindset of how we think we're going to solve the problems in our lives is that we're going to go do these things that are going to support us to have these results. And in some cases that works, and in a lot of cases it doesn't. It leaves us unfulfilled, and it leaves us disconnected from who we are. And I think one of the things that we really want to do is we want to get in the game, we want to get in the river, we want to start playing the game called life. And we need to find that edge, right? No matter where we're at in our life, where is that edge where we're going to feel absolutely alive, where we don't know what the outcome's going to be. Part of the risk in the 9 to 5 is to step away from the consistency. It's to step away from the known and step into the unknown. And in that unknown space is really where a lot of the distinctions of life come forward. And you have to be an adventurist. If you want to live in flow, if you want to live in your passion, if you want to live in your purpose, you have to be an adventurist at heart. And obviously there's physical things that you can do, but you have to be willing to go into the space of I'm going to go into the adventure of who I am and really step into discovering who I am and looking at what's really there. And I'll tell you from experience, there's going to be things that are awesome. And there's going to be things that are absolutely amazing and life-changing and phenomenal. And there's also going to be things that are terrifying. There's going to be things that disgust you, that scare you to death, that challenge you to your core, that break you down and put you on your knees, and where the only kind of solution is a higher source outside of yourself. But that's the game, right? That's being human. That's being alive. That's the distinctions, the internal distinctions, and the internal processing, and really to understand who you are, and what makes up who you are, and what's constructed this person called you, or this perception of what you think you are. And there's always the outscope, right? And I think if you study any high spiritual work, the outscope of the ego of who I am in this body, in this life condition, a lot of people would say in this spacesuit, as compared to my soul and what my soul is and what my soul's purpose is. And some of the great work around that is obviously done by Deepak. If you start looking at Deepak's work, he's an amazing scientist in explaining God and explaining our role here as the avatars of who we are, as Bucky, as Alexis, as whoever you are and whoever you've taken on, and the difference between who you've taken on and who you are on a soul level. And this idea of flow is about answering that call to that soul and being on that fringe and being on that edge and finding that space in the river where you can actually create a ton of momentum. And in order to do that, you have to be able to make the distinctions of how do I feel, how do I interpret that feeling, and how do I continuously act in order to stay on that edge, in order to stay on that balance of fear and excitement and enjoyment and doubt, but also exuberance. And I think that's one of the things. The other big distinction is the awareness of what's happening outside of you. There's always those conversations around, as is above, so is below. The internal things that are happening for me internally, or the things that are happening for me externally, are a reflection of the things that are happening for me internally. And I think in theory and in practice, that's absolutely true. And one of the things that everybody talks about, right? Whether it's, and here's another great book, is The Alchemist, right? So in The Alchemist, they reference reading of the omens, or the reading of the signs, right? And in all shamanics, they also talk about the signs, reading of the signs, reading of nature, signs in nature. But having the self-awareness, being the shaman in your life to notice the things that are taking place around you in your life, and notice the feedback that you're constantly giving and getting. And that's philosophy of Buckminster Fuller, is that we're constantly in a communicative universe, and that everything in our life is speaking to us. And through the interpretation of that language, and through the understanding and the communication of that language, is that we can start to make distinctions of where to move, right? And a lot of people, Tony would say, life is happening for us. Life's not happening to us, but it's happening for us. And and it really depends on your line of thought and what you choose to believe. And you can call it 100 different things. And I think, at some level, everybody is here and meant to do something. And part of our process as human beings is to really get congruent and really get clear about what that is, and to start to follow that. And I think a big part of the learning that I've had about flow has been about the letting go of the how. And I think a lot of times when we get out of flow, it's because we have a plan that is blind to the self-awareness, the internal awareness, and also the external awareness. Is that we are so clear in our plan and our vision and what there is to do and how it's going to be done. We're so clear in the how that we forget to see what's showing up around us. We're so clear that we want to move. What's up, Mike? How are you, brother? Good to see you, man. We're so clear about how we want to move in our lives and how we want to get there, that we close all perception to actually what is happening. It actually reminds me of a story when I was living in Bali. This is what I call the blue dot story. I was living in Bali. Have you ever been to Bali? I was living in Ubud, and I had a little car that I was driving. It was a little 4-cylinder switch, little hatchback, and I was driving. I used to drive around the island, and I had taken maybe a 4-hour drive to the other side of the island. It was beautiful, doing some snorkeling, and on the way back, this was a few years back. It was like 2012 maybe, and Google Maps was. I don't know if it was the time that it was brand new, but it was something that, internet, if Bali, it's a little bit, it's hit or miss. And, this whole thing of I'm trying to find my way back because I haven't get directions. The internet's not reliable. The maps aren't necessarily reliable. But, I'm so hard bent on following this blue dot. And the blue dot is leading me this way. And it's leading me a way that I didn't come in on. It's leading me up and over the mountain. It says that there's different roads, and I'm trusting it. And, I start to get to a point where clearly there's signs externally that are telling me, hey, you know what, this is not the right way. There's holes in the road's getting really small, it's getting really dirt. There's just signs, external signs that are saying, this is not the right way to go. There's an internal sign that's saying to me, like, hey, you didn't come this way. And it's interesting because in that distinction, part of my understanding was like, well, when in doubt, it's not always the wrong thing. So I was pushing through it, right? Pushing through this, like, oh, it's going to be right. It's going to be right. I'm going to lead with faith. I'm going to lead with trust. And not being aware of the external signs and being hard in, like, I'm going to follow the dot. The dot says that there's a way. I'm going to follow the dot. And putting myself in real danger because of my stuckness. My stuckness. This is the way. This is how it's going to get done. And I think in a lot of times we all do that in life, right? We get stuck on a plan and we lose flow. And, how do you know when you're losing flow? Is like, feels like you're paddling upstream. It feels like things are difficult. It feels like you can't get into a groove. It feels like, man, I'm challenging. And, a lot of times, what do I do to get in flow? Think about if I'm in a river, right? And I'm swimming as hard as I can upstream. I'm swimming as hard as I can, hard as I can. Why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? Why is it so difficult? I'm swimming. I'm stuck behind some boulders. This feels uncomfortable, right? And a lot of times, it's this pushing away and just releasing. And imagine being stuck behind a boulder in this river, this pushing water against you, and just pushing out into the flow and allowing yourself just to release and relax and to allow the river to take you and to lead with trust and with faith in that. Like, that's really part of the process in life. Is like we're swimming, and then there's part of this release that needs to take place to get back into flow. And that's one of the ways that you can distinguish on how to keep in there. The other way is, sometimes we're in a part of the river where it's just a little idle, and it slows down in certain sections, speeds up in certain sections. Sometimes we're in part of the river where it's just a little slow, and it's important to continuously paddle continuously paddle through this like slow section and to continue work through the slow section so you can get into the space where it's moving. And I know that those are very two similar examples, but they're pretty major distinctions. Is when do I let go and release and allow myself to be taken into life, and allow myself to be guided into trust and to have enough sensory acuity around myself and inside myself to know when it's okay to release and just to trust and allow things to unfold. And one of the times that I need to paddle, like one of the times that I need to say, you know what, like this is a slow spot. I need to start to paddle and to move, and not to ignore what's there to get, right? Because oftentimes in the slow moments are the times where it's like, okay, there's some things for you to get. There's some things for you to reflect on. There's some things for you to get congruent on, to get clear on, so that you can actually move into this next portion of the river, this next portion of life that's going to be a little bit more high pace, but you can do it with distinction and practice and purpose. So I think back, to my life example, and this piece on when things slow down, what do you do? And how do you make the distinctions, and how do you sit with yourself? And, for the last 6 or 8 months, I've been going through a process of really getting clear about who I am and what it is that I want to do and what I want to create in the world. And getting clear on the congruencies and incongruencies that have been in my life, my entire life, and the things that I've taken with me, and the things that I carried me from relationship to relationship, from job to job, from situation to situation, from moment to moment. There's this constant baggage that I've carried with me, and for everybody else, it's been invisible. But for myself, it's the thing that is always present. It's the omnipresent in my life. It's the lack of fulfillment. It's the lack of stepping into the 100% of who I am. And what was there for me to get congruent with in order to take my life, in order to move that slow space into my life into a momentum. And for me, it was a combination of two things, right? It was a combination of sitting back and getting what there is to get, and being with what there is to be with, and coming into a sense of peace. And again, I imagine that slow moving river. And if you've ever been on a river before, in those flat spots, like what really comes up is those kind of quiet moments, those silent moments. And then also this aggressive kind of paddling of like, okay, I know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm going to continue to work through that thing. And it's interesting piece. One of the things that inspired me to share today was that it cracked last night. It's been cracking over the last couple nights. And it's been this momentum around staying up till 2-3 o'clock in the morning and just working and creating a vision and working on the stuff that there is for me to work on. And in doing that, there's been this level of energy that has opened up in myself, in my business, in the things that I'm creating. And it's like, wow, like that's flow. And then how do you maintain that, right? How do you maintain that flow? And once you're in that space, how do you constantly move in that space and stay in that flow, right? And again, going back to that river metaphor, is that in every river there's that current, right? And there's that current where it is the fastest moving part of the river. And part of our distinction in life and part about being in flow is to find that current in our lives. Find that current in our life. It's oftentimes associated to who we are, what our passions are, what we're meant to do, and what we're meant to give in the world. And the more that we can stay in proximity to that, the more ease that happens in our life. And that happens in two kinds of ways: an external ease and an internal ease. And if you're feeling discomfort, if you're feeling dis-ease, or you're feeling challenged in your life, either externally or internally, one of the things that you might want to ask yourself is, how do I get more into alignment? How do I get into that flow state? How do I get into a place where I'm getting more congruent with who I am, and I'm in that current in my life where I can be moving and feeling good and feeling great about the things that I'm creating? So just a little share, Wednesday morning, just was inspired to step into flow. And I just want to invite everybody who's watching it. And again, if you're watching the replay, I know there's only 2 of us on here right now, but if you're watching the replay, comment below, ask a question. I'm always reading back and doing this stuff. Add a comment, add your insight as far as this. I think one of the most important things about Facebook, and one of the most powerful things about Facebook and social media in general, is this sense of community. And again, I just did a post on this the other day, but we live in a time where we have access to so much influence, right? Like everybody has a voice. There was a time where, the voices were limited. It was limited to media and so on and so forth. But now everybody can speak their truth. Everybody can bring that forward, and everybody can share in the growth and the raising of the consciousness of not only this community, but all communities. So, I again wrote another post about the mosaic of life, and one of the most important things that we can do in in changing the world or changing the consciousness or shifting humanity is to really shift ourselves, and how we are a symbolic piece of the entire piece, and all of us is the essence of the entire whole, right? So continue to do the work that you are meant to do is the message, and to find that space and to find that flow within your life, and continue to love and serve. The world needs you, and we're looking forward to you playing. We're looking forward to you being in this space, and I just want to send you guys lots of love, and invite you to step into that for you. See ya.